On the evening of September 9, 1980, a massive cargo ship pushes through the Pacific, bound for Japan. Approaching from the east is Typhoon Orchid, a powerful storm growing more violent by the hour. For 8 weeks, the MV Derbyshire had sailed all the way from the vast iron mines of Canada, her holds packed with 150,000 tons of ore. She had crossed the Atlantic, skirted Africa's southernmost tip, and carved her way through the vast Indian Ocean. After 8 weeks out at sea, the ship's crew of 42 seasoned seafarers, engineers, and deckhands are looking forward to wrapping up the final leg of their long voyage. The Derbyshire's captain, 47-year-old Geoffrey Underhill, is a trusted British mariner with over 2 decades of experience. He, too, is looking forward to completing the voyage. His wife has flown out from England to wait for him in Japan for a welcome reunion after months out at sea. But on the otherwise routine crossing, there is one minor concern relating to Typhoon Orchid. For days, Captain Underhill has been relying on conflicting weather reports. Convinced he could outrun the storm, he's held course, trusting his ship's speed and power. But now, there's no escape. The nearest safe harbor is hundreds of kilometers away, and changing course would expose the ship's broadside to the typhoon's full force. What Captain Underhill does next is standard procedure. He reduces speed and turns the ship's bow at a slight angle to the waves, a nautical maneuver used to stabilize a vessel in rough seas. Earlier, he also sent out a message to controllers thousands of kilometers away, reporting severe weather and the ship's position. But over the next few hours, the storm only intensifies. The waves swell more than 10 meters high and nearly as long as the Darbyshire herself. The massive ship climbs each peak, then slams into the troughs. Despite the heavy seas, there's no sign of distress. Captain Underhill stands firm. He knows his ship, and he's seen worse. At nearly 170,000 tons, the Darbyshire is a steel fortress. Stretching nearly 1,000 feet, she's longer than the Titanic and nearly twice as wide. Towering 15 stories from engine room to bridge, each of her 9 holds is the size of a 7-story building. And she's not just big, she's state-of-the-art, built to withstand some of the most brutal seas on Earth. Tonight should be no different. On board, everything is routine. The crew monitor systems, secure loose equipment, and adjust heading and engine power. They'll simply ride out the storm. But out there in the blackness, beyond the crew's notice, something unseen and unstoppable is already in motion. By dawn, the Darbyshire and everyone on board will be gone. And for nearly 2 decades, the world won't know why. The Darbyshire fell silent on September 9, 1980. No distress call, no final message. And for 6 days, nothing happened. The ship's owner didn't even report it missing. Maybe it was confidence that the ship had simply lost radio contact and would reappear. But the days stretched on, and still no word. It wasn't until September 15th that the alarm was finally raised. But by then, whatever happened was long over. An international search began with air and sea units scouring the ship's last known coordinates. But they found nothing. No debris, no life rafts, no wreckage. Less than a week later, the search was called off. The media seized on the ship's disappearance as an oddity. Smaller ships had weathered the typhoon just fine. The Darbyshire vanished without even a distress call. The official explanation was that the sea had simply taken the ship, a conclusion drawn almost immediately. And just as quickly as the search ended, so did the news coverage. Authorities repeatedly dismissed calls to keep searching. There was nothing to be found, they insisted, nothing to investigate. But for the families left behind, it just didn't add up. The search had been too brief, the answers too convenient. It was as if something was deliberately being hidden. The Darbyshire was built only 4 years earlier at the Swan Hunter Shipyard in Britain, another steel giant joining the world's ever-expanding fleet. She could transport over 150,000 tons. more than 4 times what ships could just a couple decades earlier. And for good reason.
Multinational corporations are driving record demand for raw materials and goods.
The Darbyshire was also a new kind of ship.
The OBO, or Ore Bulk Oil Carrier, is a new class of ship that can transport a variety of goods.
It meant the Darbyshire could sail from the Middle East to Australia loaded with oil and then make the return trip carrying iron ore.
There's no ballast time, no empty returns. A well-operated OBO keeps moving and keeps earning, generating 20 to 30% higher revenues.
The Darbyshire was just one of 6 ships in a series of OBO carriers known as the Bridge class, ordered by Britain's leading shipping firms and built by one of the country's top shipbuilders. There was a lot riding on the design. By the 1970s, Britain's shipbuilding dominance was starting to slip. Japan and South Korea were building ships faster, cheaper, and more efficiently. And Swan Hunter, once a titan of the industry, struggled to stay competitive, facing mounting pressure to cut costs. So whatever ended up dooming the Darbyshire might have been there from the very start. Peter Ridyard lost his son aboard the Darbyshire. Like other family members, he was desperate for answers. But Ridyard wasn't just a grieving father. He was an expert, a seasoned ship surveyor who knew the industry. And when he started digging around, he made a shocking discovery. In 1982, just 18 months after the Darbyshire vanished, another bridge-class ship was caught in a violent storm. As the crew battled the raging North Sea, something terrifying happened. Massive cracks began appearing just forward of the superstructure. The captain, fearing his ship would break apart, ordered an evacuation, airlifting the crew to safety. Digging deeper, Ridyard learned that what happened wasn't an isolated incident. Every bridge-class ship had developed stress cracks, all in the exact same area. And one by one, they were quietly being brought into port for repairs. Then, Ridyard uncovered something even more alarming. The ships hadn't been built according to their original plans, with several last-minute modifications having been made at the shipyard. Ridyard suspected shoddy workmanship and what he believed to be a flaw in the ship's design. Determined to expose the truth, he sent his findings to the Department of Transportation. But he got nowhere.
The Department of Transport say they're always willing to look at any fresh evidence that might be presented to them, but they point out that the sinking of the Derbyshire was thoroughly investigated at the time, and they have no plans for any further inquiry.
Officials refused to listen, but the families refused to be ignored. In 1984, they formed the Darbyshire Families Association, determined to expose the truth. In November 1986, yet another bridge-class ship was caught in distress. The Kowloon Bridge had broken up in shallow waters off the coast of Ireland. While crossing the Atlantic and battling rough seas, her hull, already weakened, began to crack under the relentless force of the ocean. The Kowloon Bridge was the only remaining bridge-class ship that hadn't undergone repairs other than the Darbyshire. And now, with her destruction unfolding in full view, the British government could no longer ignore the suspicions surrounding the Darbyshire's disappearance. An official inquiry was finally opened. For 6 months, experts, shipbuilders, and lawyers paraded their theories. But all along, something was off. Peter Ridyard was never allowed to present his research. Despite a mountain of evidence pointing to structural failure, his concerns were barely acknowledged. And on January 18, 1989, the official findings were published. No evidence of structural failure. The Darbyshire was just another ship that had been lost to the sea. The families were outraged. They had spent years fighting for the truth, and now all the doors had shut. All they had left was to plead their case to anyone who would listen.
We want men to go away to sea, knowing that the ship underneath them is safe, not worrying whether they come home again or not.
There have been 6 sister ships along with the Derbyshire, all of which appear to have had structural faults. And I think it's...
For years, the families fought to keep their story alive. And in 1994, their persistence finally paid off. The International Transport Workers Federation, compelled by the family's plight, decided enough was enough. In May 1994, a team of investigators, funded by the ITF, traveled to the remote waters where the Darbyshire was last heard from. The odds were against them. The ship had vanished 14 years earlier, and British officials had long insisted that finding it would be impossible. But they found the ship in just 23 hours, nearly 4 kilometers down, resting silently on the ocean floor. The Darbyshire was no longer just a name printed on a lost ship report, but it would take another 6 years to fully piece together the puzzle. And the haunting images made one thing unmistakably clear. Everyone was wrong about what really happened. On the evening of September 9, 1980, the bridge of the MV Derbyshire is tense but composed. Captain Geoffrey Underhill and his officers monitor the Typhoon's progress, adjusting course and running the engines at reduced speed for controlled maneuvering. Instruments flicker, and the ship's steel frame groans as it pitches violently, plunging into deep troughs before climbing the next towering crest. But despite the rough conditions, there's an unspoken confidence. Their ship is built for this. Yet what the crew doesn't realize is that the Darbyshire is already beginning to lose the battle. At the very front of the ship, waves hammer the foredeck, sending thousands of gallons of seawater over deck fittings, hatches, and ventilation covers. Over the course of hours, the sheer force of the water has damaged or torn them away. Below is a space called the boson store. It gradually fills with thousands of pounds of water. The added weight pulls the bow deeper into the storm, allowing even more waves to crash over the deck. Above, ventilator tops, designed to keep the water out, are further weakened. One by one, they're torn away, exposing machinery rooms and the forepeak ballast tank below. These too begin to flood, adding even more weight to the bow and causing the ship to ride even lower into the waves. On the bridge, the difference is imperceptible, but the Darbyshire is struggling, growing increasingly vulnerable to the oncoming waves. Massive crests now slam into the forward deck, and the number 1 hold hatch cover, measuring about the size of a tennis court, gives way under the crushing force of the water. Thousands of tons of seawater explode into the cargo hold. The added weight is merciless, forcing the bow to lurch even lower. The number 2 hatch cover is next. Driven inward by the wave pressure, it also quickly fills with water. As the bow sinks further, the massive ship is pushed to its limits, straining under the sheer weight. Then, the final blow. Number 3 hold gives way, and all forward freeboard and buoyancy is lost. The remaining hatch covers implode, setting off a domino effect, each collapse more violent than the last. Below the surface, the pressure collapses air pockets and tanks, tearing the vessel apart from within. The Darbyshire, the largest British flagged vessel ever lost at sea, disappears beneath the Pacific.
It was just a run-of-the-mill Typhoon. It was not spectacular. And 2 other carriers, bulk carriers, had actually gone through the same Typhoon. So Derbyshire should have gone through with no problem whatsoever.
The families had been wrong about what doomed the Darbyshire. It wasn't a structural failure, but a series of small compounding breakdowns. But that didn't matter. What did was their refusal, from the very beginning, to accept the official explanation. In the 1970s, hundreds of cargo ships were lost every single year, and seafarers were dying routinely. It's just the way it was. So officials were never really hiding anything. They just didn't care. But through their years of persistence, the families forced an industry to change. Ship designs improved, rules were tightened, and inspections got tougher. In the end, they didn't just find a ship, they changed the course of maritime history, and in doing so, protected thousands of others who would one day sail the same seas. It barely made it off the runway. With a single fuel tank hanging off the left wing, the pilot has to constantly trim just to keep it flying straight. And that jamming pod, it's meant for a completely different type of aircraft. But this abomination is headed straight for the enemy. And it's going to flip the entire air war in a single afternoon. I'm putting the finishing touches on my most ambitious project yet, a deep dive into one of the greatest air combat stories in history. And it's never been told like this before.
Did you actually see your missile hit the plane?
Yes, it was beautiful.
What started out as a regular mustard video has turned into an obsession. For months, I've been piecing together a brilliant story, researching and painstakingly choreographing dogfights, shot by shot, frame by frame. I've built new 3D models because the ones available just weren't good enough. All of it crafted to bring this story to life with unprecedented accuracy. And I'll be releasing it next month on Nebula. Nebula is where you can watch hours of exclusive mustard videos you won't find anywhere else. Videos that explore fascinating stories behind iconic machines and fantastic unrealized concepts. These are stories told the way they deserve to be, in-depth, visually, and unconstrained by the YouTube algorithm. Like my Nebula original on the legendary B-2 Spirit, where I take a deep dive into the origins of one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever produced. Nebula is a streaming platform built specifically for people who appreciate thoughtful, high-quality content. Because it's owned by creators, we're free to innovate and push boundaries, and you get to enjoy the results. You're not just getting ad-free access to unique content, you're unlocking a catalog of premium storytelling from creators like Real Engineering, Real Time History, and Wendover. And it's where you'll enjoy a growing catalog of exclusive originals, like Neo's Underexposure series, where you can learn about topics that aren't really suited for the YouTube algorithm, produced with unrushed storytelling and beautifully crafted visuals. By signing up, you support creators like me and support our best work by helping to fund high-quality projects that otherwise could never have been made. And joining Nebula has never been easier or more rewarding. Choose between monthly and yearly subscriptions, or even lifetime memberships to enjoy unlimited access forever. You can also now give Nebula as a gift with annual or lifetime membership gift cards. Sign up using the link below or by going to nebula.tv/mustard and get 40% off an annual subscription for just $36 a year or $3 a month.